Picture an American town on a Friday night in 1946. The war is over, the factories are humming, and the line outside the movie house runs past the drugstore and around the corner. Nobody in that line thinks of this as an event. It is simply what Friday night is. That year, American theaters sold an average of 90 million tickets a week. Nearly 6 out of every 10 people in the country walked up to a box office in any given week, and then many of them came back and did it again a few days later. The buildings matched the numbers. In Manhattan stood the Roxy, a movie palace with nearly 6,000 seats, a house so grand its own advertising called it the cathedral of the motion picture. Going to the movies was not a hobby in 1946. It was closer to a national religion. Now hold that image, because here is the same country 80 years later. In 2025, according to one industry study, half of all Americans did not buy a single movie ticket. Not fewer tickets than before. None at all. Harm day. This is the strange part, and it is the reason this story is worth an autopsy. The movie theater survived everything that was supposed to kill it. It survived television, the VCR, the DVD, the flat screen, and the first decade of streaming, and it reinvented itself after every blow. What it could not survive was its own supplier. For 70 years, a federal court order forced the Hollywood studios to stay out of the theater business, and the theaters lived inside that protection without ever really noticing it. Then, in the middle of a pandemic, the order quietly died. In the same season, the studios decided your living room was the better theater. The American movie theater was not murdered by technology. It was abandoned by the people who fed it. To see why that matters, you have to understand what the theater was at full strength. The Roxy opened in March of 1927 with a silent picture starring Gloria Swanson, and it was the largest movie theater ever built at the time. Uniformed ushers, an orchestra pit, a lobby like a European opera house. Hundreds of palaces like it went up across the country, many of them owned, directly or through affiliates, by the studios themselves. That last detail is the hinge of this whole story. Paramount, Warner, Fox, the giants of the Golden Age, did not just make the movies, they controlled the theaters that showed them, and they ran the system for their own benefit, forcing independent theaters to book bundles of mediocre films just to get access to the hits. In 1948, the Supreme Court ended it. In United States versus Paramount Pictures, the court found the studios guilty of antitrust violations and forced them to sign consent decrees, selling off their theater chains and abandoning the bundling game. Most studios signed quickly. MGM held out the longest and did not fully let go of its theaters until 1957. From that moment on, American movie theaters were independent businesses. The studios made the product, the theaters sold the experience. A wall stood between them, built by a court, and on either side of that wall, both industries got rich. Then the first great enemy arrived, and it sat in the corner of the living room. Television swept the country in the 50s, and the numbers it did to the movie business were brutal. 90 million weekly admissions in 1946 became 60 million by 1950. By 1960, it was 40 million, and falling. The palaces starved first. They were cathedrals built for crowds that no longer came, and one by one they went dark. The Roxy itself, the 6,000-seat cathedral, came down in 1960. It was 33 years old. By every reasonable prediction, the movie theater should have died right there, in the parking lot of the American suburb, killed by free entertainment at home. Instead, it did something institutions rarely manage. It shrank itself on purpose. In Kansas City, a theater owner named Stanley Durwood had a problem that turned into an idea. He wanted to build one 700-seat theater at the Ward Parkway Shopping Center, but the two sites he could get could not be combined into one room. So in July of 1963, he opened two smaller theaters, side by side instead, running The Great Escape on both screens, and called it the Parkway Twin. One box office, one lobby, one concession stand, two auditoriums. The math was so obviously better that Durwood never looked back. His company added a 4-screen theater in Kansas City in 1966 and a 6-screen house in Omaha in 1969. That company became AMC, and the multiplex became the new shape of American moviegoing. The formula kept scaling. In May of 1995, AMC opened the Grand 24 in Dallas, the first megaplex in the United States, 24 screens under one roof, inspired by a 30-screen theater the company had seen in Antwerp, Belgium. AMC expected the Grand to sell 800,000 tickets in its first year. It sold 3 million. Stadium seating spread, cup holders spread. The theater had beaten television by becoming something television could not be, a bigger, louder, more social night out, with more choices under one roof than any channel dial could offer, and it worked for a remarkably long time. In 2002, theaters in the United States and Canada sold about 1.57 billion tickets, the highest number of the modern era. Home video was booming at the same time, and the studios were happy to have it both ways because the theatrical window came first and the disc came later. Here it is worth pausing on how a theater actually makes money, because the economics explain everything that comes after. On every ticket sold, the studio takes half or more of the price. What is left has to cover the building, the staff, the electricity, and the projectors. The real business happens at the concession stand. A serving of popcorn costs less than 50 cents to make and sells at a markup that can run north of 1,000%. Even so, after all the overhead, a typical theater's overall profit margin lands somewhere around 4%. Read those numbers together, and the institution suddenly looks a lot more fragile. A movie theater is a low-margin popcorn business attached to somebody else's product, and it only works if that product shows up on schedule, exclusively, and strong enough to pull a crowd. For decades, that was a safe bet, because the court order made the studios and the theaters partners who needed each other. The cracks started forming after that 2002 peak, quietly, the way they always do. Screens at home got bigger and cheaper. Attendance slipped a little in almost every era that followed, and the industry papered over it the simplest way possible, by raising ticket prices. So the headlines kept celebrating record revenues while the actual crowd kept thinning. In 2019, the domestic box office hit $11.4 billion, an all-time high, and almost nobody dwelled on the fact that the audience buying those tickets was roughly a fifth smaller than the crowd of 2002. The system had one load-bearing rule left: the theatrical window. A new movie played in theaters exclusively for roughly 60 to 90 days before you could watch it anywhere else. That window was the theater's entire reason to exist. Not the popcorn, not the recliners, exclusivity. And the biggest player in the business was carrying a time bomb. AMC, by then the largest theater chain on earth, went into 2020 dragging more than $5 billion in debt. As long as the movies kept coming, the debt was manageable. Nobody planned for the movies simply stopping. In March of 2020, they stopped. The pandemic closed every screen in America, and an industry that had operated continuously through a depression and a world war went dark. The first crack in the wall came within weeks. Universal took Trolls World Tour, a movie built for theaters, and released it straight into living rooms as a $19.99 digital rental. AMC responded with a public declaration of war, announcing that Universal's films would no longer play in any of its more than 1,000 locations worldwide. The standoff lasted into the summer, and the theaters lost. In late July of 2020, AMC and Universal signed a deal that cut the exclusive theatrical window from 60 to 90 days down to 17. 3 weekends, and then a film could go to premium on demand, with AMC taking a small share of that new revenue as the price of surrender. Then came August of 2020, and the quietest funeral in Hollywood history. At the request of the Justice Department, a federal court formally terminated the Paramount consent decrees, the 1948 rules that had kept studios out of the theater business for 70 years. With movie theaters shuttered by a virus and the headlines full of everything else, almost nobody noticed that the wall protecting them had just been scheduled for demolition, with a 2-year sunset. And in December, the studios showed everyone exactly what the new world looked like. On the 3rd of December 2020, Warner Brothers announced that its entire 2021 slate, 17 films, including Dune and the new Matrix sequel, would premiere on HBO Max the same day they opened in theaters. Wall Street understood immediately what that meant. Shares of AMC and Cinemark fell more than 15% on the news. Stack those three events side by side, and you can see the autopsy finding forming. In a single year, the theatrical window collapsed, the legal wall between studios and theaters came down, and the biggest studios began treating their own streaming services as the premier venue. The box office total for 2020 came in at $2.1 billion, a drop of more than 80%, but the number was almost beside the point. The pandemic was temporary. The other three changes were not. Movie theaters figured out a century ago that the best place to sell you the next picture is in the middle of the one you are watching. So consider this the trailer. This channel opens up one fallen American, institution at a time, start to finish, and if that is a show you want to keep seeing, subscribe, and your seat is saved. Now, back to the wreckage. 2021 opened with the strangest rescue in this story. AMC, out of cash, buried under more than $5 billion in debt, was widely expected to file for Chapter 11. Instead, an army of small retail investors on the internet decided the stock was their cause, bid it into the stratosphere, and let the company raise the cash it needed to stay alive. The most storied name in American moviegoing was saved, not by Hollywood, not by Wall Street, but by bored people on their phones. The reprieve was real, and so was the bill. AMC has been paying interest of roughly $100 million a quarter, with nearly $3 billion of debt coming due in 2026. Others went through the courtroom. Alamo Drafthouse, the beloved dine-in chain out of Texas, filed for Chapter 11 in March of 2021 with about $105 million in debt and fought its way back out in under 4 months. Then the second largest chain in the world went down. Cineworld, the British parent of Regal, filed for Chapter 11 in September of 2022. Before it emerged in the summer of 2023, it had shut more than 50 Regal theaters across America, marked dozens more for closure, and shed about $4.5 billion in debt. And underneath the corporate drama, the map itself was shrinking. The country lost more than 2,000 movie screens between 2019 and 2022. By 2025, Variety put the running total at 5,700 screens gone, roughly 12% of the entire pre-pandemic footprint. In town after town, the multiplex that anchored a Friday night became an empty box behind a dead marquee. There have been flashes of the old magic, and they matter. In the summer of 2023, Barbie and Oppenheimer opened on the same weekend and turned moviegoing into a national event again, pushing the year to nearly $9 billion. For a few months, the lines were back, the costumes were back, and every think piece declared the theater saved. Then the tide went back out. 2024 slipped to about $8.5 billion. In 2025, theaters sold fewer than 800 million tickets, which is about half the crowd of 2002, at an average price north of $11. And that is the year the study found half the country never showing up at all. The strangest twist came in June of 2024, and it closed a circle nobody expected to see closed. Sony bought Alamo Drafthouse, making it the first major studio in 75 years to own an American theater chain. The law of 1948 was written to pry the studios out of the theater business. It died in 2020, and within 4 years the studios were buying the theaters back, this time not as the crown jewels of an empire, but as a boutique. So where does the body stand today? Honestly, somewhere short of dead. Ticket sales in 2026 are running about 10% ahead of last year's pace, and the industry is openly talking about its strongest year since the pandemic. The theaters that survived are better than the ones we lost, with recliners, giant premium screens, cocktails, and real food. But notice what that actually describes. It describes an event venue, a special occasion destination, the way a concert hall or a steakhouse is a destination. What died was the habit, the 1946 reflex where the theater was simply what Friday night meant, where the question was never whether to go but only what was playing. Institutions rarely die the way movies show it, with a crash and a headline. They die the way this one is dying, 17 days at a time, one shuttered multiplex at a time, one family at a time deciding the couch is close enough. The screens got smaller, then the crowds did, and the people who made the pictures decided they could live without the room. So the lobby is open and the floor is yours. When did you last see a movie in an actual theater, and what was it? Is there any film that still gets you off the couch on opening weekend, or does knowing it streams in 3 weeks settle the question? And if the old habit is really gone, tell me what finally broke it for you: the prices, the phones, the parking, or just life? Tell me in the comments where you stand. The marquee outside is still lit. Whether anyone lines up under it again is the one part of this story Hollywood has never been able to script.